Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Small. I'm an advisor here at Raymond James, and we partner with SHRM on SHRM 401k Solutions by Raymond James. We help retirement plan sponsors, 401k, 403b, other retirement plan types of retirement plans, help build and maintain programs for your who are the ultimate beneficiaries of the hard work that you all put in building and maintaining these plans. So today we're going to talk through evaluating plan service providers. So there's a lot of folks, a lot of vendors that are involved in the successful running of a retirement plan, and we'll get into all of that today. Just a few bits of housekeeping before we jump in. You will receive a follow-up email after this call. We can share the slides as well. But the follow-up email will also have some information about SHRM PDC credits, CE credits, and then just some informational stuff as well. If you have any questions, feel free to pop into the Q&A. My teammate is monitoring the Q&A, the chat right now. And then also we can answer them at the end, and we could even allow folks to if you raise your hand, we can allow you to ask questions as well. But with that, we'll just get started. So what we're going to learn today, the questions that we'll be able to answer is, why is this such a critical topic? What are my responsibilities as a plan sponsor, as the representative of the organization that's ultimately creating and maintaining this plan? What are my responsibilities? Who can I turn to for support? Why do employers make changes to their vendors? So why are they changing advisors? Why are they changing record keepers? Those sorts of things. And what are the risks that the company that I work for faces, and then also you individually as a fiduciary or someone managing other people's money in this case? What are the risks that we face? So why it should be a priority. So the why driving plan sponsors, now's the time to really get into this, get an understanding of who your vendors are, who's touching the plan, what are they doing, what's their role, are they fulfilling that? There may be sometimes the same company may be fulfilling multiple roles. But when we think about the industry, competitive pricing and some pretty dramatic changes into the industry make evaluating your retirement plan options a necessity. So we looked at a few stats, a couple of things that are jumping out to us. American workers are 12 times more likely to save for their future if they're offered a competitive plan through their employer. It's a great way for employees to save conveniently, to set aside money for a rainy day, ultimately, hopefully retirement. But we all love things that are automatic, things that are easy. And 401ks, I'm going to say 401ks are easy, generally speaking, for the employee. For all of us on this call, it would be it would not be accurate to say that 401ks are easy. There's a lot of moving parts. But for your employees that are benefiting from the programs that you've helped to build and maintain, it can feel pretty easy. Retirement isn't everyone's financial goal. So 401ks have evolved where there's some pretty neat features that can help folks where retirement may be a distant dream. Maybe it's, putting a kid through college, maybe it's buying a first home, but the 401k plan can be pretty dynamic in that sense. And then investing in a retirement plan for employees takes time and care, but it's impactful and it really matters. For the vast majority of your employees, the 401k, other than maybe their home, is their single biggest financial asset. So when you can feel fulfilled by the time when all the time that you put into building and maintaining your plan is ultimately you're helping build something that can get your employees to a spot where they no longer have to work, where they can enjoy a comfortable retirement. So now's the time to proactively review vendor relationships. So we kind of think of it in two different ways. So the top one there in blue, improve the offering to your employees. That's the ultimate goal always when we're building 401ks, 403bs, 457s, whatever type of retirement plan. Improving the offering and making it easier, making it more attractive, better investments, better features, a better record keeper with, a better interfacing with your employees. All those different things, they all matter. So that's when we think about, our loyalty under ERISA, which we'll get into. If you're a fiduciary, if you're managing a 401k plan, a 403b plan, you're managing other people's money, you have a legal duty of loyalty to run the plan and a duty of care to run the plan in the best interests of your employees. So always think that we're always going to have our fiduciary hats on when we're thinking about this. We want to be able to improve the offering as much as we can. And then on a personal side, by proactively reviewing vendor relationships, looking at pricing, looking at the services, monitoring the administrative functions and the efficiencies of your vendors helps to reduce litigation and regulatory risk. So there's a number of regulators that touch retirement plans in some shape or fashion. The Department of Labor, I don't need to preach to an HR community how important it is to be on the right side of the Department of Labor, but they have take a very active role in retirement plans. The IRS on the tax side, the SEC on the investment side. So there's a lot of regulatory things going on, but by being proactive, by benchmarking your plan, benchmarking the services of your vendor, you're able to reduce that regulatory risk. And then litigation, if anyone reads the financial press, it even makes the Times or the Wall Street Journal as well. But there's a lot of litigation in the 401k, 403b pension space, 457 space. It's usually upmarket, so the very large plans, the hundreds of millions, billions. But what we've seen the last few years, and we'll get into this also, is that we've seen that those trends move down market, meaning smaller plans are becoming targets of litigation. And no one wants to go through litigation. It's, we're in a country where anyone can sue anyone for anything, but you want to have a fiduciary file, you want to have a governance file where you have documented procedures, policies that you're following to document a prudent process. So why now? Why would you want to benchmark now? The retirement plans landscape has changed dramatically. We've seen massive industry consolidation. I would venture to guess that, multiple folks on this call have gone through conversions unwillingly, where we've seen a lot of larger record keepers buy some of those smaller record keepers. So some examples recently, like Empower has bought Mass Mutual, bought Prudential, bought a couple other smaller record keepers. Previously, a few years prior, Principal bought Wells Fargo, those sorts of things. So there's a lot less folks in the room. There used to be hundreds of record keepers. Now we're down to, really a dozen or a couple dozen that have any significant heft. Technological advancements, you think about even just the last 5-10 years with the advent of AI, with the internet becoming the dominant place where folks are transacting, where it used to be more phone based and folks with paper statements. With the advent of smartphones and the advent of these websites really getting tuned up, technological advancements have changed the game from the employee side, but then also from the employer side. We've seen tremendous gains with payroll integrations, with systems, retirement plan systems. So there's some pretty neat things out there that you'd want to take a look at when it comes to your vendors. Preference need gap amongst generations is, you all on the front lines of employee relations know that you're dealing with different problems based on where different people are in lives. Where some people are retiring and they're worried about, COBRA, or they're worrying about Medicare, things like that. That's much different than your new hire who doesn't even know what a 401k is, doesn't know anything about healthcare. So there's different things that we need to meet people where they are. Cross-selling. So we've seen this a lot where retirement plan vendors they're contracted for one service, but they're trying to sell to your employees or sell to your company multiple other lines of business. So, if they're trying, a record keeper is trying to sell your employee on life insurance, even though it has nothing to do with the 401k plan, or your 401k advisor is also trying to sell you health insurance, as a health broker, those sorts of things. You want to be definitely want to be aware of that. And then the last one, the use of employee information. You want to get an idea of exactly how the vendors that you work with, how they're using your employee data. Are they selling it? Are they sharing it with third parties? If they are, why? And does it make sense? So you really want to key in on that and really want to get an understanding of that. That's when we go through requests for proposals, RFPs, we ask all these questions to get an idea of what each of the vendors that we're potentially going to work with, how they attack these different things. So there's heightened plan sponsor activity and engagement. When we looked at some surveys, this is a Fidelity survey from a year ago, but plan sponsors are the most active in years. So, nearly 9 in 10 plan sponsors are looking to make changes to plan design. This was in 2022. Plan design meaning changing participation requirements, changing eligibility, maybe adding automatic enrollment or automatic escalation, those sorts of things. They're making investment menu changes. They're increasingly, and this is in the middle here, increasingly focused on financial wellness. So getting out a program to educate your employees, to make them more comfortable with their finances, whether it be related to the 401k or more broadly, any kind of financial topic. We've seen a huge uptick in that. We've seen an increase in record keeper search activity. This is when employers or sponsors are considering to change their record keeper, so move where the money is held from one place to another. And we're seeing a highly competitive landscape for advisors like us, where we're seeing a lot of folks thinking about moving, thinking about improving the offering. So all plan sponsors, regardless of plan size, must follow the same rules and regulations. So here we look at the Department of Labor put this out, the 401k universe, whether plans are under $1 million, $1 million to 10 to 100, 100 to $1 billion, and more than $1 billion. So it's where assets and plans are. So the blue is how many plans there are. So the vast majority, more than half, are very, very tiny 401k plans, relatively speaking. About 56% of the overall plan universe. But you can see it almost flips in terms of the more than $1 billion. More than $1 billion has about half of the total assets. But you see there's a ton of 401k plans, but the vast majority of them are $10 million or smaller. The other 10% or so, 5, 6, 7% is in those what we would call mid, large, or mega plans, which are 10 to 100 million or 100 million greater than $1 billion. But the interesting thing is that Walmart's 401k plan, one of the largest in the world, in the country, is the same as if you're held to the same standards as if your local mom and pop store that has 5 people that has a 401k plan, both held to the same standards, same laws, same regulations, everything. The difference being that those larger companies have huge HR, finance, legal staff on hand that can handle all these things. For most companies, it's an HR department of one, or a very stretched thin HR department where they don't really have they have the intellectual capital, but they don't have the time. So that's where vendors come in. Hiring the right vendors can help take work off your plate and protect yourself and your organization. So qualified retirement plans are governed by ERISA. So what we're going to talk about today is mostly through the lens of these qualified plans. So 401ks, most 403bs, traditional pension plans. There's some other lesser known qualified plans, but that's what we're going to be talking through today. ERISA just turned about 50 years old. It's a federal law that sets minimum standards around retirement and health plans. It's administered by the Department of Labor. So there's some interesting stuff. ERISA was not in 1974. They were not thinking that ERISA was going to create 401k, but that's how we got here. So What are the duties required of a fiduciary? So the exclusive benefit rule. So fiduciary, so all of us on this call must operate the plan in a way that solely benefits participants and their beneficiaries. So your employees, and if they have beneficiaries named, that's what we have to run the plan for. It doesn't mean we have to give them, a huge employer contribution, profit sharing, or anything like that. That's a what we call a settler decision, where you don't have to be wearing your fiduciary hat. But if you offer a 401k, the way you run things, the way you monitor investments has to be done in a way that solely benefits your employees. Prudent expert, fiduciary actions will be held to a standard of an experienced professional. So we run into some plan sponsors where they do have the expertise on staff, where someone is extremely knowledgeable around retirement plans. That's probably the exception, though. For the most part, most places, folks are not. They have a good working knowledge of retirement plans, but they're not experts per se. That's where hiring an outside vendor can help you to get access to the expertise you need. The plan document rule: fiduciaries must follow the plan unless the terms of the plan contradict the rules of ERISA. So if you work with a provider and they have a prototype document or a standard document, you're going to be good. Generally speaking, within ERISA, those provisions have been blessed by the IRS, Department of Labor. But you're going to be held to the standard that if your plan document says something, that's going to be the governing provision. So if your plan document says that your eligibility provision is 21 years and a year of service, but in practical terms, you're letting people in when they're 18 and 1 month of service, you're going to be out of compliance because you're not following the plan document. That's why every year you should take a look at your plan document, work with your vendors, dig in, make sure that your procedures that you're doing in practice match what the plan document says. So diversification rule: the fiduciaries must offer a wide range of investments to help participants diversify. Seems pretty basic, but there's a lot of moving parts in building out an investment menu, making sure that it's right for your employee base. So we look at some best practices following these guiding principles. Just touch on a few of the most important ones. Knowing the standards, laws, trusts, knowing all the things that you're going to be held accountable from legally as being a fiduciary. Diversifying assets, preparing an IPS, an investment policy statement. How do we want to manage this plan? How do we want to build an investment menu for our employee base? Controlling and accounting for investment expenses. And then 4 and 6, monitor the activities of the prudent experts and use them when appropriate. And then lastly, avoid conflicts of interest and prohibited transactions. So conflicts of interest, avoid them to the extent you can, understand them if you can avoid them, and avoid prohibited transactions, meaning, self-dealing where, you're certain transactions that are not up to standard, meaning it's an extreme conflict of interest. You're paying yourself for services that it could otherwise be done by anyone else. So there's some interesting things with prohibited transactions, but generally speaking, avoid conflicts of interest. So who can I turn to for help? So again, the DOL encourages plan sponsors to work with, to seek out those prudent experts. But let's begin with the history lesson, just to kind of give you an idea of the evolution of the 401k. So 401k was born back in 78, a few years after ERISA was signed into law. Low-tech record keeping, quarterly statements, not participant directed. So the company decided how your money was invested. You only got to know what you were in on a quarterly basis. Obviously, this is well before the advent of the internet. The mutual fund industry driven to move to participant-driven investing, giving employees the choice of how they invest. So if you wanted to be more aggressive, more conservative, that really started in the 1990s. For the next decade, the dominant players were mutual fund managers and insurance companies. 401k was a vehicle for them to sell their product, not necessarily to help people save and build balances. It was just those companies, those mutual fund companies, insurance companies, just looked at the millions of Americans that were going to be in 401k plans as customers and ways to just push product. I think we've come a long way since then. The early 2000s emergence of independent consultants acting as fiduciaries, so legally required to act in folks' best interest. That's a novel concept at the time, which now seems like it should be table stakes. But that's really where this fiduciary movement started. Providers now required to disclose total compensation, fee disclosure in 2012, and then, kind of present day, thin margin and the high tech spend leads to a ton of M&A activity and the industry consolidation we've seen. So given that backdrop, the Department of Labor encourages you to hire prudent experts. So this diagram here, we see the plan sponsor in the center. All those other bubbles are vendors or potential vendors. So at the top, administrator. So if anyone uses third-party administrator, administration can be done in-house. Like you could do it yourself, or you could outsource it to a record keeper or a potential administrator, a third-party administrator. There's investment managers. So those are the managers of the mutual funds that are the collective trusts that populate your investment menu. There's the record keeper. So where the money's held, that's like, Fidelity, Empower, Principal, Vanguard, those sorts of places that hold the money, produce statements, take calls from your employees, those sorts of things. There's the financial advisor. Financial advisor is going to help, bridge the gap from all these different vendors, is going to monitor the investment menu, make recommendations, help with plan design, be there to truly consult and help you build a strong and effective retirement plan. And then lastly, an actuary. In some cases, if you have employer contribution formulas that require the use of an actuary, if you're a pension plan, you will certainly need an actuary, but that's there as well. So there's a couple different ways you can engage with fiduciaries and, some legal standards that apply to fiduciaries, but there's a few, and this is a bit of alphabet soup with all these numbers. But ERISA 338, if you have hired a 338 advisor, that advisor will take discretion on the investment menu, meaning that they don't have to ask your permission to make changes. If they want to move from ABC fund to XYZ fund, if you engage with them on a 338 basis, they will do that automatically. They'll do that on their own. They don't need your permission. That tends to be the most expensive, but it gives you potentially the most legal lift, and because you're outsourcing that to a large extent. There's also ERISA 321. That's a non-discretionary investment consultant, meaning they're going to a 321 advisor will make recommendations to you and to you as a committee, and you can either choose to approve them or deny them, accept them, or not take them. And that's a constant back and forth. You're getting recommendations, and you can choose to act on them or not. There's an ERISA 316, so this is not related to investment. This is related to plan administration, so related to your non-discrimination testing, to notices, to all the day-to-day administration. You can actually outsource that to a third-party administrator that's willing to act as a 316, and they can do the administration on your behalf in a discretionary capacity. You'll still have some input, and they'll still need data from you, but you can offload a good chunk of that to 316s. And then lastly, 408G, investment advice to individual participants. To the extent someone's giving actual advice to an individual participant, that's where 408G comes to. So the record keeper custodian, so where the money's held, while important, is generally not considered a fiduciary function. So when you're dealing with your record keeper on, if you don't have a 316, but you're dealing with your record keeper on non-discrimination testing, on moving payroll, on all this day-to-day administration, they're generally not required to act in the client's best interest. They're not fiduciaries under the DOL, IRS, or any other regulators' rules. So when you think about all your vendors, we like to think of it, and we do this with our plan sponsors, but an annual meeting with all your plan providers to learn about what's new in regards to the following topics. And we kind of pose these questions to vendors sometimes. What are you speaking to prospective new clients about? How can we be using you more effectively? So employee experience and tools, we're talking about the website, we're talking about financial planning tools, calculators, white papers, all the things that make up the employee experience and the tools available to folks. How are your new clients using those? Are you rolling anything out? Customer service, what are call response times like? Are your employees happy with the service they're receiving from whichever vendor it is? Looking at potentially outsourcing more administration and integrating payroll. So we find that a lot of issues start at the payroll level and they can spiral out from there. So being able to integrate payroll and potentially outsourcing more administration, good things. Compliance and risk management. So figuring out, are the procedures that we're following, are we compliant? Are we effectively managing our risk? Are we in good shape to fight off any potential litigation or regulatory concerns, anything like that? Investment management. So looking at your investment menu, is it still appropriate? Do you have the proper, amount of diversification? Do you have the proper number of funds? Are there any asset classes that you're missing? The technology, the plan sponsor and participant technology. Again, that's a little bit related to employee experience, but then lastly, cost structure and pricing. Getting a full understanding of what you're paying, what you're receiving, and is that appropriate relative to the market. So why are plan sponsors making changes? So the industry is evolving and aspects are becoming commoditized. So where we're seeing differentiators is the organization's financially strong? Is there a deep bench? We're starting to see a big divergence in some companies that are not dedicating the money or the people at the retirement business. So we're seeing a divergence there. The client service team, this is related to organizational strength. The industry experience and commitment to the industry. Are they a new player, or do they just kind of dabble in the 401k, 403b retirement industry, or do they have have they taken their lumps? Have they really understood what the 401k and the retirement industry are all about? Technology, we talked about that, but participant education and communication, we're seeing some places really dedicate tremendous resources to education, to communication, particularly in the more virtual world that we live in. But we're seeing a divergence where other providers are really not getting into that. Client retention and referrals, getting an idea of what your record keeper's retention is like, and are they getting referrals, those sorts of things, and pricing. We've seen pricing change a lot. Where we're seeing things become more commoditized, more where you're really not going to see a difference from one provider to another. The record keeping, administrative functions, a lot of the softwares are very similar underneath the hood, so there's not huge differences. Regulatory and trustee services, investment availability. It used to be where, and around investments, it used to be where, it was each record keeper, each provider had a very skinny list of investments. So if you wanted a particular investment, it may not be available on your platform that you currently were. You'd actually have to move providers to get access to different investments. Now, today, largely speaking, investments are widely available. There are really not too many restrictions. Some places are a little bit more easier than others in that, but it's widely commoditized. Regulatory and compliance support, most places are going to be pretty similar there, and then the conversion process from moving from one to another. So we looked here at another survey, and we looked at reasons why plan sponsors are looking for a new record keeper. So it kind of runs the gamut here. The single biggest from 2022 was servicing issues related to the pandemic of 2020. 13, the second one there is, we've seen this a lot, is technology and benefits integration. So we've seen a lot of this around payroll, where employers and plan sponsors are really looking to get out of the payroll business in terms of having to remit 401k contributions through payroll. It becomes very laborious. That's where a lot of the errors happen. So that's where folks are looking to leverage technology to further integrate systems where it's just the system is just can take from what the employee is directing, and the employer can be largely taken. A couple other ones to talk about: financial wellness, employee education support. Those are big costs, administrative support, and integration with an HSA and a better website. So there's a lot of different reasons. Usually it's not the sole, there's usually more than one reason. It's probably some combination of, two or more of these, that why employers, plan sponsors are looking to change record keepers. So they're looking for employers, plan sponsors are looking for a better way to manage retirement plans. So 94% of plan sponsors work with an advisor, and about 22% are actively searching for a new advisor, looking for someone else to be sitting at the same side of the table as them to help them advocate for their employees, and manage vendors, build better investment menus. So when we see reasons for a new advisor, they offered a strategy with more extensive services, so not just around the investments, offering even more services, more effectively dealing with servicing issues with the plan provider. So oftentimes advisors can be the first, line of defense, trying to help you advocate for your company and your employees with the plan provider. So, when you're working with a particular record keeper, if you have an experienced financial advisor, will likely have multiple other clients with whatever record keeper that you're at. Where that helps you is that you're probably not the first client to have whatever issue that you're having. So if you have a good experienced advisor, they probably have been through your particular issue before, and they may have even had that particular issue with your record keeper. They may have, or it may be a blueprint for helping to intercede and help troubleshoot and move things along. Offering a strategy with better employee communications and education. Again, that's kind of broadening out those services. So the most valued benefits of having a plan advisor, it ultimately helps to potentially improve participant outcomes. So ultimately, how much money folks are going to be able to save, that their goals are more fine-tuned, all those different things helps the ultimate beneficiaries of the plans. Time spent on plan administrative support, being able to reduce that. You definitely want to do that, and then providing an objective resource to help make good choices about the plan. So when you're thinking about whether you want to do things in-house or take things, outsource kind of has a negative connotations, but in this case, it's kind of like, what do I want to take off my plate? What do I want to retain versus what do I want to get rid of? So you can see here, I talked about a TPA, or third-party administrator. The standard TPA services is, working on plan design, drafting a plan document, verifying annual employer contribution, allocating year-end contributions and forfeitures, 5,500 notices, those sorts of things. Those are the base services that your record keeper or third-party administrator TPA will do. There's a number of things that you can do over and above that, like that you can outsource to a 316. They'll do loans, they'll do hardship withdrawals, they'll administer the loan policy, interpret the plan document, determine eligibility. This is a big one where, making sure that people are entering the plan or having the opportunity to enter the plan at the right time. They'll sign the 5,500 on your behalf. All those different things are really, really important. And they need to get done one way or the other, but you can outsource those. So what are my risks? So when we think about one of the chief regulators of the retirement plan space, what are the DOL's top compliance issues? So the single biggest one is late deposit of deferrals. So the way the law reads, or the regulations read, is that you have until, basically 15 days or as soon as administratively feasible to get monies from deposited from the company bank account into the individual 401k accounts of all your employees. So in a digital world, as soon as administratively feasible probably means a business day, a couple business days. So what the DOL will do if you ever got audited is they'll look, say, hey, XYZ company, they typically, they process payroll on Friday and monies get deposited into 401k accounts on Tuesday, something like that, a couple days. And you do that regularly, but then all of a sudden, it's taking you 10 days here, 8 days there, 7 days there. They're going to look and say, hey, you did this, you're in a digital payroll setup. You did this for, every 2 business days for years. All of a sudden you're doing this late. That money belonged to participants earlier. It should have been earlier. That's where they can come in and ding you on that. And you don't want to do that. Excessive service provider fees. So if you haven't benchmarked your fees, if they're paying too much. Imprudent investments. Fiduciaries that didn't know or fulfill their duties. So this is also the benefit of having good vendors related to the plan, that they help you to understand what are your duties and are we on a path where we're regularly meeting those duties and fulfilling those duties. So when we look at mitigating fiduciary risk, litigation is a big thing in the retirement plan space. A couple trends that we're seeing: relying upon investment and guidance from administrative providers does not provide that fiduciary cover. You want to have the importance of an independent advisor to help evaluate investments, particularly if the record keeper wants to sell you their own products. That's another trigger for DOL, for IRS, those sorts of things. But you want to make sure you're documenting a review of any proprietary funds. High record keeping fees. So you want to make sure you're benchmarking. You want to go out to market periodically. So you want to do those things to make sure that the fees that your employees are paying, if you're passing them through to the 401k plan, are appropriate and fair relative to the market. So here you can see the distribution of total plan cost varies widely by plan size. So over on the left there, less than $1 million, you could see that, on the low end, a plan may pay 0.5%. On the high end, a $1 million plan may pay 2.5% in total costs, which is obviously very expensive, but less buying power. If you look at over the more than $1 billion, the range is is much tighter, and the numbers are lower. The lowest is, about 1/10 to on the low end, 0.1% to about 0.5%. Much tighter. Those higher asset balances gives those plans greater purchasing power and greater negotiating power when you go out to market. So you want to make sure that your fees, if you have, a 10-person firm with a couple $1 million in a 401k, you're not going to be held to the same pricing standards as Walmart's 401k, because Walmart has $50 billion in their 401k. You're going to be held to the standard of, hey, I have a $2 million plan. What is an appropriate cost? What does the market say is appropriate for a plan, a smaller plan, like a $2 million plan? So you want to understand retirement plan fees and who's getting compensated. So questions to ask your vendors: what is the total cost to run your plan? Do the investments in your menu generate revenue? So sometimes there's revenue hidden inside of these funds that can be used to offset different providers' fees. So used to cover the cost of service providers And if revenue is used as excess revenue, get credited back to the plan, or does the record keeper or someone else retain that? So you can see below, you have, or on the top, a revenue cost structure. Employees will never see an explicit fee. In this case, we're just showing there's a 1% expense ratio of the investments, but inside that 1%, the financial advisor, the record keeper, the third-party administrator, the custodian are all getting paid from that. Below, a zero revenue cost structure where everything is stripped out and everyone is getting paid directly. The investment managers, so the mutual funds, just about 0.2%. The advisor is getting paid 0.4%. Record keeper about 0.2. Administrator about 0.2. But everybody, it's very clear who's getting what, versus the top where it's a lot more opaque. So best practices for plan fee evaluation, you want to carefully evaluate the fee disclosures of each of your providers. Ask your service providers on a regular basis to explain their fees and services. Maybe you're paying for something that you're not using or you don't value. You want to scrutinize service provider contracts. Are you getting what you paid for? Again, make sure that what's in there, what they say they're going to deliver, you're actually delivering. And you want to benchmark fees. There's an implied DOL requirement to regularly benchmark them. Larger plans may opt to conduct formal RFPs every 3 to 5 years. Smaller plans can just opt to leverage some of the tools available from advisors and service providers to assess their offering versus the costs of other, of what market is like. So some other litigation trends we're seeing: cross-selling plan data. I talked about this before. Really important to understand, hey, the folks that I work with, they have access to my employees' data, to data about them, personal information. Review your service contract for cross-sell language and who owns the data. Do they own it once you sign the contract, or is it restricted? You want to make sure it requires participant consent for any sharing of data. Obviously, there's you as an employer have to share, social security numbers, dates of birth, those sorts of things for them to run a successful 401k, 403b, some other retirement plan. Where it gets more ticklish is where, okay, your record keeper's like, I have this data. I want to, I know that this person is gonna retire soon or is close to retirement age, and we want to sell them health insurance. So we really want to understand that. QDIA selection, qualified default investment alternative. That's where if someone joins a 401k plan, 403b, some other retirement plan, and doesn't elect how their money's where their money's gonna go to, that's where the money goes automatically. There's some extra scrutiny on these types of funds, these investments, because typically it's where the most money goes. So you want to make sure you want to use plan data to determine the right glide path, monitor and educate participants if they're using multiple target date funds. And the last one at the bottom there, cyber and fraud risk. Participant accounts are being hacked and unauthorized distributions are occurring. So you want to issue a request for information to service providers for their cyber and fraud procedures. Understand if they're going financially obligated to step in, if proper procedures were followed on your end or on your employees' end. And then there's educating participants on how to monitor their accounts and steps to follow if fraud occurs. So the DOL has gotten more active on the cybersecurity front. A few years back, they issued some guidance aimed at ERISA plans, sponsors, fiduciaries. So the DOL started to audit plans to review the cybersecurity programs of ERISA plan sponsors and fiduciaries. So we should all act now to improve the safety around cybersecurity, agreements around ERISA plans, and the efforts to educate ERISA plan participants about the importance of strong cybersecurity practices. So you in your HR, as your advocate for your employees, educating them on how to protect themselves, particularly the folks that are not as tech savvy, maybe the most vulnerable folks, making sure that they have an understanding of how to protect themselves and what to do if fraud may be occurring. So the DOL put out a tip sheet for plan sponsors for hiring for service provider with strong cybersecurity practices. When the DOL tells you something, you don't fight it. You want to understand this. You want to make sure that how you're looking at service providers models this. So what are some actionable steps for 2024? So schedule time with your current providers to review their fees and services, inquire about recent enhancements. How can you maximize their offering? I'm sure there's some people on this call that might not have the foggiest idea of the total fees that are related to their 401k plan. And I would say that's not the exception, that's the rule. So there's no shame in that. That's the 401k, 403b, retirement industry overall. It's not done a very good job about educating people about fees, about being transparent. What you want to do is make sure if you have a takeaway from here, is get an understanding of what you're paying and for what services you're receiving and how you can maximize that. Conduct an RFI, RFP process to understand the market, evaluate price versus value. Look at some other reputable record keepers, whatever vendor it is, to get an understanding of, am I what I'm paying for? Does that make sense? Is it a good value? Use potential provider changes as an opportunity to revisit plan design and refresh the offering. So it's when you do conversions, when you move from one record keeper to another, you can kind of think of it as a blank slate. Like, hey, if we were starting from scratch, would we do this differently? Is there ways we can improve efficiencies, administration, those sorts of things? So defining success for your retirement plans, begin with the end in mind. Try to understand, what is the goal of this plan? Is it just to offer, a competitive retirement plan? Or is it something more? Is it, I want to, help every employee be able to retire by such and such a date, of such and such an age? Is there some sort of income replacement target that you want to get to? But you want to identify and articulate its purpose. Everybody on the committee understands it. It's a dynamic conversation, one that happens periodically to ensure that your organization's current goals and demographics are aligned, so that the plan and the way the plan is designed aligns with what your population looks like. A lot of populations have changed, if not dramatically, they've changed significantly since the pandemic. Then evaluate progress by defining specific metrics. So do you want to improve participation? Do you want to improve savings rates? Do you want to improve account balances? Those sorts of things. So it's kind of circular thing that never stops, but the facets to it. Optimal plan design. Are my provisions correct? Is it, does it help? Is it a good balance of administrative efficiencies for the company, but also things that we think will help employees? Effectively communicating with employees, investment and risk management. Are the investments right? Regulatory considerations, a clear fee structure so that you as the employer, but also your employees, understand what they're paying for and why and for what. And then efficient operations and quality service from the vendors. So this is my partner's email on this, but you can email her at kristen.kolish@raymondjames.com. I can respond to this one as well, or we have a conference webpage. There's some from some of the SHRM conferences we've done. There's a ton of really cool stuff on here: plan sponsor, fiduciary compliance checklist, DOL cyber tip sheets, some other DOL stuff, white papers on getting through a plan audit and improving employees' financial independence. We have a wealth of resources that you can take advantage of, with some really cool stuff that can help you benchmark your plan, get a better understanding of what the cyber procedures are for for your 401k, your 403b provider from a record keeper perspective. And another takeaway, and I'll jump back a couple pages here, but that number 2 there, if it's not an RFI or RFP, go out and do a benchmarking service. There's we have in our own practice have a number of benchmarking services available to us. It can be a little quicker way just to get an understanding of I'm not really sure. First off, I'm not sure what we're paying. So first we identify that. Then next is okay, is what we're paying for a good value, and does it make sense given all the services we get, and then what are other plans of similar size and demographics to us receiving on the open market. So schedule time with your providers to get an understanding of everything. If you don't know, even if you do know, you just want to get an understanding of, is there anything new rolling out, potential provider changes, opportunity to improve the plan. These plans should be dynamic. You should be constantly thinking of ways we can improve. If you're getting feedback from employees, that's always extremely valuable. If you're hearing from employees that the website isn't intuitive, that they're on hold for forever, those are good things to go back to your advisor or whatever vendor that they're talking about, going back to them and saying, hey, this isn't right. I can't have my employees trying to take a loan and he or she sat on the phone for 45 minutes. That's not what we want. So that's employee feedback, a great opportunity to get into this. So let's continue the conversation. There's connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll be in touch. I'll connect with you all on LinkedIn as well. Just pop you a note if you have any questions. You can certainly ask. We can have continued conversations. We're here as a resource through our partnership with SHRM, so we'd love to continue to talk to you all. And then lastly, let's talk about some potential questions from the audience. We can open it up, and I can look at Q&A as well.
Yeah, Tom, there was one question from David regarding Q&A that I thought would be better to answer live, just to give everyone the benefit. Right there in the Q&A, it's what's included in the cost and fees of a plan. Is it just overhead charges, or is there also a cost to do a trade?
So a good question. Typically, there's no cost to like trades for the vast majority of employer-sponsored 401k plans. If you have a brokerage-based 401k, there may be trade costs, but generally speaking, there's not. It's the charges are typically, annual or quarterly fees from your advisor, from if you have one, a record keeper, custodian, a third-party administrator. Those are the typical ones that the entire plan pays and divvies up however appropriate. The ones, there's some that are participant paid. So there can be transaction charges. I talked about loans before. Most places, if you take a loan, you'll get charged a loan fee, but the only person that would get charged is the person actually requesting the loan. So it's typically, there's the overall plan charges that get divvied up across the whole plan. But then if there's participant charges, like participant transaction charges, like taking a distribution, taking a loan, taking a hardship, quadro, if in the case of divorce, those sorts of things. But good question. Any other questions that folks have? Okay, well, in the absence of any other questions, we really appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, you'll get a follow-up email with information about the presentation and about credits, SHRM credits, those sorts of things. But feel free to reply if you have any other questions. If you need some help, we're always stand at the ready, and we love engaging with SHRM members. Thank you all and have a great day.